This week in Texas, we discuss GA46, an executive order that requires hospitals that get public money to keep track of undocumented immigrants.
A chilling effect on people seeking medical care.
We also sit down with 13 Investigates to talk about their report on the United States Postal Service and the incidence of insider mail theft. How pervasive is the problem? And should you be concerned the next time you mail a check or a gift card?
For USPS, what are you doing to prevent your employees from stealing mail?
Our political insiders weigh in on leadership roles at the state capitol on both sides of the aisle, and President Joe Biden's pardon of his son Hunter.
I think he would have been well advised, frankly, if he would have pardoned his son and President Trump at the same time.
And is Enron back? Maya Shea takes a look at a new company using an old name. This week in Texas. Hello again, I'm Tom Abrams. Thanks for joining us. We begin this week in Texas with Executive Order GA46. The order, signed by Texas Governor Greg Abbott, went into effect on November 1st, and it requires hospitals that receive public money to ask patients if they're in the country legally. A local cardiologist posted on social media that patients don't have to answer that question when asked. And when that post went viral, Governor Abbott posted on social media himself. The governor wrote on X last week, "Hey, Texas Children's Hospital and Baylor College of Medicine, this doctor is putting your Medicaid and Medicare funding at risk. You better think twice and have crystal clear records. There will be consequences for failing to follow the law in the executive order." Here is that order, GA46. Nowhere in it does it require patients declare their citizenship status. We sought expertise from U of H law professor Seth Chandler.
The order requires hospitals receiving Medicaid or CHIP funding to report back to the Texas Department of Health and Human Services how many people responded affirmatively to the question, are you unlawfully present in the United States, and how much did it cost to treat those people?
And that's all it does.
Essentially, yes.
Texas Children's Hospital issued a statement after the governor's post. It read, "Texas Children's fully supports Governor Abbott's new executive order and is in full compliance. We have worked closely with the Texas Hospital Association and our industry partners across the state to ensure compliance in advance of the effective date. While we recognize that individuals working at Texas Children's hold their own personal views on many topics, those opinions do not necessarily reflect the official position of Texas Children's Hospital. We will continue to prioritize patient care while ensuring we are in full compliance with all laws and legal directives." The order explicitly states that nobody can be denied care regardless of their immigration status, but some critics suggest it might actually prevent people from seeking care in the first place. We spoke with an attorney from the Texas Immigration Law Council in Austin about those concerns.
This particular executive order we've seen come through other states, very similarly the way it came through Texas. So was started in Florida, for instance, as an executive order, and then they passed legislation to actually codify the rule. And what we saw there was what we're worried about here, which is essentially a chilling effect on people seeking medical care. It's in all of our best interests to make sure that people seek care when they are worried, because it ends up costing more money when people delay it until there's an actual emergency. So somebody who might be getting recurring headaches, for instance, may not go in and get checked out to ensure that they're okay. And maybe they would find out that they have hypertension, something that's easily treatable. And under this executive order, they might have fear of going in and talking because they might be asked about their immigration status. And then we wait until there's a heart attack, and then it's going to cost a lot more money to treat that person. So we do have concerns that this is not good for Texas generally, either our public health or just human rights and people seeking medical care where they need it.
So the governor's office would suggest, based on the order, that it doesn't prevent people from seeking help. It only looks to catalog the information and to determine the costs. Your contention is that just by doing that, it intimidates those who might be afraid to share their immigration status.
Right. They know they're going to be asked about it. They don't know what happens to that information. And we're about to have an administration come in that may or may not seek those records.
So what would you like to see happen?
I think it's important for people, if they're worried about this, that they should know that their care can't be impacted if they refuse to answer the question, they are still supposed to receive whatever the same emergency care that they should have had, regardless of what their immigration status is. And so they shouldn't be afraid to go into hospitals. They should do it and just feel like if they don't know how to answer the question, they have concerns or questions about what lawful presence means, then they should just decline to answer the question. Say no, thank you, and that's valid. They're not doing anything wrong by the executive order, and so they should move forward in that way. Just decline to answer and get the medical help that you need for you or your family members.
The cardiologist here in Houston said that same thing on social media. Created quite an interest. Does that surprise you?
It does. I don't know what, I mean, it would surprise me to see Governor Abbott's response to it. I know that I understand the interest in the doctor's message, because I think that there was confusion there. And it's helpful to hear someone in authority, someone at the hospital say, this is okay. You can just say, no, thank you. I don't want to answer this question. So that part doesn't surprise me. The part that surprised me was Governor Abbott's response to his TikTok video, the threat about funding, the veiled implication that the doctor was doing anything wrong when the doctor was not. Nothing about this executive order requires patients to say or do anything. It requires hospitals to ask the question and to keep records of how much it costs to spend on people's healthcare who are undocumented. It doesn't require patients to say or do anything. Doesn't say that hospitals can't inform patients of their rights. Nothing about what the doctor did was unlawful or against the order. And so it was surprising to see his response. It seemed like an attack on that doctor's First Amendment rights, which I'm surprised by.
We did reach out to both the governor's office and the cardiologist about the issue. The governor's office referred us to his social media post. The doctor declined comment. Coming up on This Week in Texas, is Enron back? We'll share with you the cryptic new iteration of the famed failed energy company. But first, we'll feature a report from our 13 Investigates team that might make you think twice before sending a check or gift card through the United States Postal Service. Welcome back to This Week in Texas. For the past year, the 13 Investigates team has looked into the distrust many of you have in the U.S. Postal Service. Through our year of reporting, USPS has never agreed to sit down with ABC 13 and answer our questions on camera. So 13 Investigates has been making extensive public information requests to try and learn just how common it is for USPS employees to steal mail. Our Kevin Ozebek shares what he uncovered.
How would you describe your faith in USPS right now?
My faith has been shocked.
Jimmy Blackstone is losing faith because he says sometimes the mail arrives at his Northwest Houston home already open. And a $100 Visa gift card sent his way never made it, and instead was spent at this nearby Colombian restaurant.
Have you ever eaten at that restaurant?
I've never been to that restaurant.
Do you think this card was stolen because this was an inside job?
I absolutely think it was an internal job at the Postal Service.
It's a story 13 Investigates has heard over and over again. In April, we met Kim Graydon, whose check she sent certified to the IRS was stolen and washed. To this day, her tracking number still shows her certified envelope at the USPS North Houston Distribution Center.
What do you make of that?
That it's an inside job. One-sided or
And in February, we profiled business owner Emily Matoyer, who was receiving mail opened with crucial checks missing inside.
What's your confidence level in USPS right now?
0.
While we can't say for certain these three are victims of USPS employees behaving badly, we know internal mail theft is happening. 13 Investigates obtained hundreds of pages of case files over the past 5 years from the USPS Office of Inspector General, which investigates employees breaking the law. In June of this year, an Humble mail carrier was throwing away mail at her own home. Just look at the letters thrown into her garbage bin. In 2022, a worker inside that North Houston distribution center admitted to stealing mail as she targeted cash and gift cards. Her sticky fingers likely affected over 1,000 postal customers. A year earlier, a Tomball carrier was arrested. You're looking at the 1,882 pieces of mail found inside his car. In 2020, a carrier at Houston's Fleetwood Postal Station was found with 10,000 pieces of mail in his car and home. Those are USPS boxes inside his house. And that same year, a carrier in Galveston was dumping your bills, your brochures, and batches of all kinds of mail in this field. 13 Investigates has learned through a federal records request that from January of last year through June of this year, the USPS Office of Inspector General has made 602 arrests nationwide for mail theft.
You know, it's one of the most beloved federal institutions, and right now it's under attack. It's under attack by criminals. Criminals are infiltrating the Postal Service.
Frank Albergo is the union president for the roughly 450 remaining U.S. Postal Service police officers. These are officers trained to patrol USPS facilities. But Frank says USPS is defunding and downsizing its own police force. And Frank believes internal mail theft would go down if more officers were brought in and inspected the bags of workers coming and going. A recent Postal Service audit shows a postal employee's personal bag that was caught stuffed with stolen greeting and gift cards.
Would you feel confident mailing anything of value nowadays?
No, I mean, I hate to say this, but right now there are pockets within America where the mail is unsafe. It's being stolen. It's being ransacked. It's being sold on the dark web.
Is Houston one of them?
Yes, Houston is one of the worst.
To talk more about the report, which is getting national attention, let's bring in 13 Investigates' Kevin Ozebek. Kevin, great report. And I'm struck, I think, maybe most of all by the fact that the Postal Service never really responded to you with a statement until after the fact. There was sort of this non-admission admission.
I'll tell you, this story, Tom, was one that was months in the making, right? We put a lot of work, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears in this one. And the reason why is it was so tough to get answers from the U.S. Postal Service. So a little bit of background here, which I think a lot of people don't understand, is there's actually 3 branches of our Postal Service. There's the USPS, that's the mail carriers, the people at the distribution centers moving our mail. There's the OIG, that's the branch of the USPS that investigates employees. And then there's the Postal Inspection Service. That's essentially the police unit of the Postal Service that investigates external mail theft. So whenever we would have questions about this, you know, we had questions specifically for USPS. What are you doing to prevent your employees from stealing mail? They would always just divert it to the OIG, right? Like, it was so frustrating. In fact, there was one even heated phone call in our office between the spokesperson, the local spokesperson for USPS, because we couldn't get any answers from them, right? And instead, we would just get these kind of vague statements, often from the OIG, right? Which is frustrating, because we heard from viewer after viewer after viewer who had suspicions, who were having issues. Obviously, envelopes were arriving at their home already open. Incoming, outgoing checks were being stolen, were being washed. There was a lot of frustration there, and that frustration even trickled into our office as well here at Channel 13.
Well, and you do a lot of stories, I think, that get a lot of reaction from our viewers because they connect to it personally. But you said this sort of story, by far, gets more reaction from people because it confirms their concerns about what's happening with their mail.
By far, there's no story that I've ever done here that has resonated with our audience more than this one. And this story here is maybe number 3 or 4 or 5 of postal reporting we've done, and we got dozens of emails again from people after this one aired. And I think the reason why this really resonates with people is they're having these issues. They think something is going on, right? Something isn't adding up to them, right? Like, for example, their certified envelope is being stolen. They have a tracking number. That tracking number shows it's at the same location for months, right? So what is going on? How could this be anything but an inside job? That's what some of our viewers are thinking. So when they see a story like this, I think they kind of say, maybe I'm not crazy. Maybe my suspicions are right here.
I'm fascinated by one of the parts of the story that mentioned the possibility of organized crime, either domestic or foreign, somehow being involved with getting employees jobs at the Postal Service.
So get this, the USPS Office of Inspector General, again, the branch that investigates internal abuse, internal breaking the law, told us that's its focus now, is looking at postal employees, not just stealing mail, but looking at those employees who are colluding with external organizations, so organized crime rings. And we know from our past reporting here at 13 Investigates that Houston is a hotspot when it comes to checks being stolen in the mail and then resold on the dark web. right? So is it possible that USPS employees are selling their master keys to organized crime rings? We know in some of the case files that has happened before. So that's what the OIG means about looking at these external crime rings that are colluding with USPS employees. And when you think about that's happening, it's crazy, isn't it?
So what do you tell people about sending checks or gift cards in the mail?
You know what? I don't offer advice on this because I don't know what the best answer is. I can tell you from some of our viewers, we've heard that they now will send stuff via UPS or FedEx, but again, that costs more money, right? We've heard from some people who will no longer even send checks in the mail. They will hand deliver them if at all possible. I guess what's so sad to see is the level of distrust with USPS is so high. It's such a big American institution. It's so interwoven with the history of this country. To see this much faith lost in it, it's sad to see because this is a true American institution.
So you've done several stories. Was this the last one, or are you like a dog with a bone? You're still going after it?
No, we still want to get to the bottom of this, right? Because it's so difficult to get answers from USPS, and one thing that we are very curious to kind of give you a heads up on what we're working on now is we know one of the big pushes from USPS is to change these master keys, right? These physical master keys that postal carriers carry around with them. They open up those big cluster mailboxes, right? We know carriers are a target for them because thieves want them to steal the mail. USPS is trying to transition to digital master keys, right? But the Postal Carrier Union is telling us, as far as they know, none of those have been installed here in Texas. We put in Freedom of Information requests to figure out how many are being installed here. We get those rejected. So that is one thing we are very curious about because USPS touts that this is one of the solutions, but how much is it actually being used down here?
And they won't tell you whether it's being used.
And they won't tell us.
Kevin Ozebek, another great report. Thanks
Thank you,
to you and your team for that. When we come back, a conversation with our political insiders, strategists Court Kenning and Otis Evogaru. We'll be back. Welcome back to This Week in Texas. I'm joined now by our political insiders, Otis Evogaru and Court Kenning. Otis, thanks for joining us, given the fact that you had an eye procedure earlier this week. That's why you're wearing the glasses. And we'll start with you and get your thoughts on President Joe Biden's pardon of his son, Hunter Biden. Did he do the right thing?
Yeah, thank y'all for having me and being patient with these Ray-Bans on. As they say, the show must go on. Listen, I think for President Biden, who's in a tough spot, it's not the best politics, and it probably sets a terrible precedent. But what I will say, though, is that Trump and Trump's team, they've been clear that they want revenge on their political enemies, and they've been obsessed with Hunter Biden for the past 4 years. So I'm sure that weighed heavily on Joe Biden's heart, his mind, and what led him to the decision to eventually pardon his son. And he's not the first family member to do this, right? He's not the first president to give a pardon to a family member. Trump recently just did that with Charles Kushner, Jared Kushner's father, and Ivanka Trump's, father-in-law. And so, it's not like this hasn't happened before. It's not the best thing in the world. I know folks are going to say, hey, he said he wouldn't pardon his son. But I think with Trump's win, he had to change his mind and had to go forth in a different path.
Court, your thoughts on whether or not it was the right move, I guess, especially given since President Biden had said for so long he would not step in and do anything.
Well, first of all, I'm excited to know that Otis believes the future's so bright that he's got to wear shades with President Trump coming back into office and the Senate under Republican leadership and the House as well. And so the governor and state of Texas all under Republican leadership. I just, I don't have so much problem with the pardon itself. It's just of his son. The problem that I had with it is the lies. All the way even past the election, you had him saying that he wouldn't do this. Why would you do that? Why would you say that these things take time. The Justice Department's got to go through all this paperwork and everything like this. It was known when he was sending people out on the street to say that he wasn't going to do it, and in his own words saying he wasn't going to do it. I think he would have been well advised, frankly, if he would have pardoned his son and President Trump at the same time. Not that the second means anything, because all those charges are falling by the wayside anyway, but it would have changed the story and the dynamic of what's going on here.
Interesting. Let's turn to some state politics while we have time. And we'll start with you, Court. I know that there are votes long before the session starts in Austin for leadership on both sides. Do both sides or either side need a change in leadership in the House or in the Senate?
Tom, that's actually happening while we speak right now. Those meetings are happening both on the Republican and the Democrat side. There are votes for the leadership positions, speaker, leader of the Democrat Party, Democrat caucus, essentially a whip on the House side. All that's being done on the House side. The Senate side is the way it's organized with the lieutenant governor and such, doesn't have those kind of issues. The lieutenant governor has a considerable amount of power. He is the speaker. He's the one who makes all the decisions on what moves in the Senate. But on the House side, where you've got all that political activity, all the races that the governor and lieutenant governor are involved in, and namely the speaker's race, and in his own district, and it was tight. We could potentially see a lot of new leadership coming in the next legislative session.
Otis, your thoughts? You got about a minute left.
Yeah, I think for both parties, it's going to be very interesting. And for the Republican side, obviously, their pathway is to the speakership and the gavel for the 89th legislative session. For Democrats, it's going to say, how are we going to legislate? How are we going to prioritize policies that people want to hear in Texas? How are we going to make Republicans pay a consequence for not doing what the people of Texas wants, right? And so that's what Democrats are going to have to grapple with their new leadership, with leadership change. I don't know if necessarily there needs to be a leadership change, if there is or not. I'm not in the day-to-day of the bargaining and things like that. But what I will say is that there probably needs to be a philosophical change about how Democrats go about business in the House chamber.
Otis, Court, as always, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it. Even though we had to do it remotely this week, still great insight from both of you. When This Week in Texas comes back, we're going to talk about, of all things, Enron. Welcome back. 25,000 jobs lost, billions of dollars wiped out, and executives who went to prison. That is the legacy left behind 23 years ago this month when Houston energy company Enron declared bankruptcy. But now, is the Crooked E making a comeback? A splashy advertising campaign is buzzing around town with newspaper ads and billboards. Someone now owns the name, the logo, and that history. ABC 13's Maya Shea has more.
Houston-based Enron has filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy.
Shockwaves hit Houston as one of America's most exciting companies crumpled under its own weight. Thousands lost their jobs and pensions immediately, while the company's CEO would go to trial for bilking investors out of billions.
Now this extra from the local paper here, guilty, certainly good news for prosecutors.
When I covered the Ken Lay and Jeff Skilling trials 18 years ago, the last thing any of us expected was for Enron to rise again in a splashy newspaper ad, billboards, and a gauzy promotional video. We are Enron. All timed for release today.
No one knows what the hell this is.
Famed attorney Dan Cogdale, who is still friends with some of the Enron executives he represented, is shocked that anyone would try to resurrect the Enron business, even if the internet rumor mill is pointing at a possible cryptocurrency product. You don't think anyone's going to buy an Enron crypto?
I can't imagine that being a good idea. I don't see it.
But when it comes to Enron, there is always a buyer. After all, Trong Pham remembers the day when his boss bought the infamous Crooked E logo 20 years ago.
And I had a check on my hand. And when the truck coming in, delivery coming in, then the boss told me, like, you got to hand this truck to the guy when he delivered. So I have the check on my hand last time, like $54,000.
The sign now sits at a chiropractor's office, too heavy to move again. Unless you think nobody else would consider buying anything Enron related, even Cogdale today was intrigued enough to pick up some merch from the New Again website.
I've already ordered a puffer vest and some bumper stickers, so we're going to find out.
Thanks to Maya for that report. We do expect to learn more about the company's plans in the coming days. Now that does it for This Week in Texas. We appreciate you joining us, and we hope you'll take a look at some of our previous episodes. All of them are available at our website, abc13.com, and on demand, wherever you stream ABC 13. Until we see you again, have a great week, and be kind to one another.